Sometimes the most shocking discoveries happen in the most ordinary moments, when you're just relaxing at home, watching television, and suddenly your entire world tilts on its axis. What I'm about to tell you is the story of how a casual evening of channel surfing became the breakthrough that solved an 8-year-old missing person case and revealed a truth so extraordinary that it challenged everything law enforcement thought they knew about what happened to 17-year-old Megan Chen on that October night in 2015. Megan Chen was the kind of teenager that everyone liked but few really knew. At 17, she was a senior at Roosevelt High School in Portland, Oregon, where she maintained a 3.8 GPA while working part-time at a local bookstore to help her family make ends meet. She was quiet, responsible, and mature beyond her years, the kind of kid who reminded teachers why they'd gotten into education in the first place. Her older brother Danny, 19, was a sophomore at Portland State University studying computer science. Despite the typical sibling rivalries of their younger years, Danny and Megan had grown close as they'd gotten older. They shared inside jokes, watched movies together, and had developed the kind of relationship where they could talk about anything. Their parents, David and Susan Chen, were first-generation immigrants from Taiwan who had built a modest but comfortable life in Portland. David worked as an accountant for a small firm, while Susan managed a family restaurant in Chinatown. They were strict but loving parents who had always emphasized education and family loyalty above everything else. Megan was our anchor, Susan would later say. She was the one who kept our family grounded, who made sure we all stayed connected even when life got busy. October 17, 2015, started as a typical Saturday for the Chen family. Megan worked her morning shift at the bookstore, came home for a family dinner, and was planning to spend the evening studying for her SATs. But around 7 p.m., she received a text from her friend Jessica Martinez about a party at another classmate's house. Just for a couple hours, Megan told her parents when she asked for permission to go. "I'll be home by 11, I promise." David and Susan were initially reluctant. Parties weren't really Megan's scene, and they worried about her being around drinking and other teenage behaviors they'd tried to protect her from. But Megan had been working so hard lately, and she rarely asked to do anything social. "Okay," Susan finally agreed. "But you text us every hour, and you're home by 11. No exceptions." "I promise, Mom," Megan said, giving her mother a hug. "I love you." Those were the last words Susan Chen would hear from her daughter for 8 years. The party was at the house of Brad Thompson, whose parents were out of town for the weekend. It was the kind of typical high school gathering that happens in suburban neighborhoods across America, about 30 teenagers, loud music, some drinking, and the kind of drama that seems earth-shattering when you're 17 but trivial when you're an adult. According to witness statements that police collected later, Megan arrived at the party around 8 p.m. with Jessica and seemed to be having a good time. She wasn't drinking. Several people specifically remembered that she was carrying a bottle of water and politely declining alcohol when it was offered. At 9 p.m., she texted her parents as promised, "Having fun. See you at 11. At 10 p.m., she sent another text, "Everything good. Leaving soon." But Megan never came home. When 11:30 p.m. came and went with no sign of Megan, Susan began calling her daughter's phone. The calls went straight to voicemail. At midnight, David called the Portland Police Department to report his daughter missing. The initial investigation moved quickly. Police officers went to Brad Thompson's house, where the party was still ongoing, and interviewed everyone present. What they learned was puzzling. Multiple witnesses confirmed that Megan had been at the party until around 10:15 p.m. She had been talking with a group of friends near the back patio, and several people remembered her saying she needed to leave soon to meet her curfew. But then, sometime between 10:15 and 10:30, Megan had simply vanished. One minute she was there, the next minute she wasn't, Jessica told police through tears. I looked around for her when it was time to leave, but I couldn't find her anywhere. I figured she'd already gone home. The most puzzling aspect was that Megan's car was still parked outside the house. Her purse was found in Jessica's car, where she'd left it, containing her wallet, phone, and car keys. She had left the party with nothing but the clothes she was wearing. The investigation that followed was thorough and immediate. Portland police treated Megan's disappearance as a potential abduction from the start, given that she had left behind all her personal belongings and had never shown any signs of wanting to run away. They canvassed the neighborhood around Brad Thompson's house, interviewed every person who had been at the party, and analyzed Megan's phone records and social media accounts for any clues about what might have happened to her. The search expanded to include nearby parks, the Willamette River, and every location where a teenager might go voluntarily or be taken against her will. Volunteers joined law enforcement in combing through Portland's extensive network of trails and green spaces. But after weeks of intensive searching, investigators had found no trace of Megan Chen. The case received significant media attention, with Megan's photo appearing on local news broadcasts and missing person flyers posted throughout the Pacific Northwest. The Chen family organized search parties, hired private investigators, and worked tirelessly to keep Megan's case in the public eye. As months turned to years, the case grew cold. Police followed up on hundreds of tips and potential sightings, but none led to Megan. The family never stopped searching, never stopped hoping, but the pain of not knowing what had happened to their daughter and sister was devastating. Danny, in particular, struggled with guilt and obsession. He blamed himself for not being more protective of his younger sister, and he spent countless hours researching missing person cases and following leads that usually led nowhere. "I should have been there," he told his parents repeatedly. "I should have gone to the party with her, or convinced her not to go." By 2020, 5 years after Megan's disappearance, the Chen family had reached a point where they were trying to accept that they might never know what happened to their daughter. The investigation was still technically open, but there were no active leads and no new evidence. Danny had graduated from college and was working as a software developer for a tech company in Seattle. He visited his parents regularly, and Megan's disappearance remained a constant presence in their family conversations, but they had learned to function around the hole that her absence had left in their lives. Until the evening of October 17, 2023, exactly 8 years after Megan had vanished. Danny was in his Seattle apartment, eating dinner and mindlessly flipping through channels, when he stopped on a documentary about human trafficking that was airing on Investigation Discovery. The program was called Hidden in Plain Sight: Survivors of Modern Slavery, and it featured interviews with young women who had been trafficked and had eventually escaped or been rescued. Danny almost changed the channel. After years of following his sister's case, he had become burned out on crime documentaries and missing person shows. But something made him pause and keep watching. The documentary was interviewing a young woman identified only as Sarah, whose face was partially obscured and whose voice was electronically altered to protect her identity. Sarah was telling the story of how she had been kidnapped as a teenager and forced into prostitution for several years before managing to escape. As Danny listened to Sarah's story, something about her mannerisms seemed familiar. The way she gestured with her hands when she spoke. The way she tilted her head when she was thinking. Little details that reminded him of someone, but he couldn't quite place who. And then Sarah mentioned a detail that made Danny's blood run cold. "I was taken from a party," Sarah said, her disguised voice describing an experience that sounded remarkably similar to Megan's disappearance. "I was 17, just a regular high school student. I went to a party at a friend's house, and I never made it home." Danny turned up the volume and paid closer attention. Sarah continued, "The people who took me were very sophisticated. They knew exactly how to approach teenagers, how to gain their trust, how to separate them from their friends without anyone noticing." As the interview continued, Danny found himself studying Sarah's partially visible features with growing intensity. Her build, her hair color, even the shape of her hands, everything seemed to remind him of Megan. But it was a small, unconscious gesture that finally convinced him. When Sarah was describing a particularly difficult part of her experience, she reached up and touched a small scar on her left temple, a scar that would be barely visible to most viewers. Danny recognized that scar immediately. Megan had gotten it when she was 12 years old, falling off her bike in their driveway. Danny stared at the television screen, his dinner forgotten, his heart racing. The woman on the screen, despite the voice alteration and partial face obscuring, was his sister. He was absolutely certain of it. Danny immediately called his parents in Portland. "Mom, Dad, you need to turn on Investigation Discovery right now. Channel 285. There's a documentary on, and I think Megan is on it." David and Susan scrambled for their remote control and found the channel just as the documentary was concluding. They missed most of Sarah's interview, but they were able to see the final few minutes, including the gesture that had convinced Danny of her identity. "Oh my God," Susan whispered, staring at the screen. "Danny, do you really think?" "I know it's her," Danny said, his voice shaking. "I know that scar. I know the way she moves. That's Megan." The next morning, Danny contacted the Portland Police Department and spoke with Detective Lisa Park, who had taken over Megan's case 3 years earlier when the original investigating officers had retired. "I understand this must be incredibly difficult for your family," Detective Park said gently. "But we get calls like this fairly regularly when missing person cases receive media attention. Are you absolutely certain about what you saw?" Danny provided detailed descriptions of the specific mannerisms and physical features he had recognized, including the scar that only family members would know about. Detective Park agreed that the similarities were worth investigating. The process of contacting the Investigation Discovery Network and trying to identify the woman in the documentary proved to be complex and time-consuming. The show's producers were bound by strict confidentiality agreements designed to protect trafficking survivors, and they couldn't simply provide contact information for interview subjects. However, Detective Park was able to work through official law enforcement channels to contact the FBI agents who had worked with the documentary's producers. After several weeks of bureaucratic negotiations, they were able to arrange for a message to be passed to Sarah, asking if she would be willing to speak with investigators about a missing person case from Portland. The response came back through the same channels. Sarah was willing to meet with law enforcement, but only under carefully controlled circumstances designed to protect her safety and privacy. The meeting was arranged for November 15, 2023, at a safe house operated by a victim services organization in Los Angeles. Danny, his parents, and Detective Park flew to California, where they would finally learn whether their 8-year search had led them to Megan. When they walked into the small conference room at the safe house, Danny knew immediately that his instincts had been correct. Despite 8 years of changes, she was now 25 instead of 17, her hair was different, and she carried herself with a wariness that hadn't been there before. The woman sitting across from them was unmistakably Megan Chen. "Hi, Danny," she said quietly, and her brother broke down in tears. The reunion was overwhelming for everyone involved. Megan, who had been living under a different name for years as part of her protection from the trafficking ring that had held her, was simultaneously overjoyed to see her family and terrified about what her newfound visibility might mean for her safety. Over the next several hours, Megan told her family and Detective Park the story of what had happened to her on October 17, 2015. She had been approached at the party by a woman who claimed to be the older sister of one of her classmates. The woman had seemed friendly and trustworthy, and when she offered Megan a ride home, Megan had accepted, thinking it would be easier than calling her parents for a pickup. Instead of taking her home, the woman had driven Megan to a location where several men were waiting. Megan was drugged, kidnapped, and transported to California, where she was forced into prostitution as part of a sophisticated trafficking operation that specifically targeted teenage girls from middle-class families. "They told me my family had been killed," Megan explained through tears. "They said if I tried to escape or contact anyone, they would hurt other girls. They kept me drugged and moved me around constantly so I never knew where I was." For 6 years, Megan had been trapped in the trafficking system, moved between different cities and forced to service clients while living in constant fear. She had attempted to escape several times but had always been recaptured and punished. Her breakthrough had come in 2021, when a federal task force raided the operation she was being held in. Megan was rescued along with 12 other women, but the trauma of her experience had left her afraid to contact her family or return to her old life. "I didn't know if you were still looking for me," she told her parents. "I didn't know if you would still want me after everything that had happened." The investigation that followed Megan's identification led to the arrest of several individuals involved in the trafficking ring, including the woman who had initially approached her at the party. It turned out that the operation had been specifically targeting high school parties in suburban areas, looking for girls who fit certain profiles. Megan's case became part of a larger federal investigation into human trafficking operations throughout the West Coast. Her testimony helped prosecutors build cases against multiple defendants and led to the rescue of other victims. But for the Chen family, the most important outcome was simply having Megan home. The process of rebuilding their relationship after 8 years apart was challenging and required extensive therapy and support. Megan struggled with PTSD, trust issues, and the difficulty of integrating back into a life that had continued without her. Danny, who had never stopped believing that his sister was alive somewhere, became her strongest advocate in navigating the complex process of reclaiming her identity and rebuilding her life. "I never gave up hope," he told reporters. "Even when everyone said I should accept that she was gone, I knew in my heart that Megan was still out there. I just never imagined she was going through something so horrible." Megan eventually decided to go public with her story, becoming an advocate for other trafficking survivors and working with law enforcement to educate parents and teenagers about the tactics used by traffickers. "I want parents to know that this can happen to anyone," she said in her first public interview. "I was a good kid from a good family, and I still became a victim. But I also want them to know that there's always hope. No matter how much time passes, no matter how impossible it seems, never stop looking for your children." The documentary that had led to Megan's identification with her family was updated to include her reunion story, and it became one of the most watched episodes in Investigation Discovery's history. More importantly, it led to several other families being reunited with missing loved ones who recognized their relatives in the program. Megan's case also led to changes in how law enforcement investigates missing teenager cases, with increased focus on the possibility of trafficking and better coordination between local and federal agencies. Today, Megan Chen is 26 years old and slowly rebuilding her life with the support of her family and a network of survivor advocates. She's enrolled in college, studying social work with the goal of helping other trafficking survivors. "I lost 8 years of my life," she reflected in a recent interview. "But I gained a purpose. If my story can help one family find their missing child, or prevent one teenager from being taken, then maybe there was a reason I had to go through all of this." Danny, who has become a prominent advocate for missing persons cases, credits his decision to keep watching that documentary as the most important moment of his life. "I almost changed the channel," he admitted. "I was tired, I wasn't really paying attention. But something made me keep watching. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was luck, or maybe it was just love. But I'm grateful every day that I didn't look away." The story of Megan Chen's disappearance and recovery serves as both a cautionary tale about the sophisticated methods used by human traffickers and an inspiring reminder that families should never give up hope, no matter how much time has passed. Sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries happen during the most ordinary moments, and sometimes the thing you've been searching for finds you when you least expect it. For the Chin family, 8 years of searching ended with a casual evening of watching television, proving that miracles can happen even when they seem impossible. Megan's face had been hidden in plain sight for years, disguised by trauma and false identity, but love and family bonds proved stronger than any attempt to erase who she really was. In the end, it was the simple act of a brother who never stopped believing that brought her home. Don't forget to like the videos and subscribe to the channel for more short stories.